The crystal champagne flute clinked against Cassandra Blake's diamond tennis bracelet as her voice sliced through the cabin air. "A father this careless shouldn't be allowed near business class," she declared, her Chanel suit immaculate against the Italian leather seat. 35,000 feet above ground, her words dripped with privilege and contempt. Cole Harrison sat silent in economy's cramped plastic seats, his calloused hands gently holding 7-year-old Maya as she wheezed into his faded Walmart t-shirt. This manicured finger pointed dismissively at them, her Hermes bag worth more than Cole's entire year's salary. But Cassandra had no idea that the man in patched jeans possessed something that would shatter her world of wealth and superiority. What happened next would expose a secret so profound that it would silence her golden tongue forever, and prove that true worth has nothing to do with a bank account. The difference between first class and economy had never felt more like a chasm between two different worlds. Cassandra Blake adjusted her silk scarf and took another sip of Dom Perignon, the bubbles dancing on her tongue as she surveyed her domain. The business-class cabin hummed with quiet luxury, soft LED lighting, the gentle whir of personal air purifiers, and the discreet rustle of flight attendants in pressed uniforms catering to every whim. Her seat could transform into a full bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, and her personal entertainment system offered more movies than most theaters. The teak wood table beside her held a crystal water glass and a menu featuring lobster thermidor and Wagyu beef. 40 rows behind her, Cole Harrison sat in seat 37C, his knees pressed against the seat in front of him. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across his weathered face as he gently rubbed circles on Maya's back. His daughter's small frame shook with each labored breath, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that made Cole's trained eye instinctively assess oxygen saturation levels. The air recycling system couldn't mask the smell of reheated airplane meals and cleaning chemicals. His canvas bag, patched with duct tape in 3 places, sat wedged beneath the seat in front of him, containing everything they owned that mattered. Maya's cough echoed through the cramped economy section, and Cole felt every passenger's eyes turn toward them. He pulled out a small inhaler from his shirt pocket, his movements precise and practiced in a way that spoke of years of medical training he couldn't afford to reveal. "Easy, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the engine noise. "Just breathe with Daddy, nice and slow." His calloused fingers, scarred from years of surgical procedures he no longer performed, gently guided the inhaler to her lips with the expertise of someone who had once saved lives for a living. The flight attendant approached with a mixture of concern and annoyance, her smile strained as she leaned down toward Cole. "Sir, is everything all right back here? Some of the other passengers are expressing concern about the coughing." Her tone carried the diplomatic language of someone trained to handle delicate situations without causing offense. Cole looked up at her with tired eyes that had seen too much loss, too much struggle, and nodded quietly. "She has asthma. We're managing it fine. Thank you." He didn't mention that he knew more about respiratory distress than anyone else on the plane, or that his medical license was still valid despite his current circumstances. From her throne in business class, Cassandra's voice carried with crystal clarity as she spoke loudly into her phone. "Honestly, Margaret, the quality of passengers they allow on flights these days is simply appalling. There's a man back there with a sick child who clearly doesn't belong in the air." She paused dramatically, her diamond earrings catching the soft cabin lighting as she gestured with her free hand. "I mean, if you can't afford proper health care for your child, perhaps you shouldn't be traveling. It's really quite inconsiderate to the rest of us who pay premium prices for a peaceful flight experience." Cole's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he continued his gentle ministrations to Maya, who was beginning to breathe more easily. He had learned long ago that engaging with people like Cassandra only made situations worse, and his daughter's well-being was far more important than his wounded pride. His fingers automatically found Maya's pulse point on her wrist, counting beats per minute with the precision of someone who had spent 15 years monitoring cardiac rhythms in operating rooms. The muscle memory of his medical training kicked in as he assessed her color, breathing pattern, and level of consciousness, all while appearing to be nothing more than a concerned father comforting his sick child. The businessman in seat 12 cleared his throat loudly and turned to face the economy section. "Excuse me, flight attendant, but I have to agree with the lady. That coughing is quite disruptive. Perhaps they could be moved further back." His Rolex Submariner gleamed as he gestured dismissively toward Cole and Maya. "I paid quite a bit for this seat, and I expect a certain level of comfort." His voice carried the entitled tone of someone accustomed to having his demands met without question. "Surely there must be some policy about sick passengers and their proximity to business class." Cole felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in his chest, the same feeling he had experienced countless times since losing everything. He remembered when he used to fly first class himself, when colleagues treated him with respect, when his opinion mattered in hospital board meetings. Now he was just another face in economy, another person struggling to make ends meet, another target for the casual cruelty of those who measured worth by wallet size. He pressed his lips together and focused on Maya's breathing, which was steadying thanks to the inhaler and his careful monitoring. Maya looked up at her father with eyes that seemed far too old for her 7 years. "Daddy, why is that lady being mean about my cough?" she whispered, her small voice barely audible above the engine noise. "I can't help it when my lungs feel tight." Cole's heart broke a little more as he saw the confusion and hurt in her innocent face. He had tried so hard to shield her from the harsh realities of their new life, but moments like these reminded him that children absorbed everything, felt every slight, internalized every cruel comment directed at their family. "Some people don't understand, baby girl," Cole murmured, smoothing her dark hair with gentle fingers that had once performed life-saving surgeries. "They think having money makes them better than other people, but it doesn't. What matters is how we treat each other, especially when someone needs help." His voice carried quiet strength despite their circumstances, the same tone he had once used to calm nervous residents before difficult procedures. "You're not doing anything wrong. Your asthma isn't your fault, and you have every right to be here." Cassandra's laugh tinkled through the cabin like expensive wind chimes as she continued her phone conversation. "Oh, and Margaret, you should see this father. Clearly unemployed, probably on some government assistance program, dragging his sick child on a plane they can't afford. The clothes look like they came from a thrift store. Honestly, it's just sad." She took another sip of champagne, the crystal glass reflecting the soft lighting as she spoke. "I swear, sometimes I think they should have income requirements for air travel. It would certainly improve the overall experience for those of us who actually contribute to society." The words hit Cole like physical blows, each one a reminder of how far he had fallen from his former life. There was a time when he had commanded respect in operating rooms, when his expertise had saved hundreds of lives, when his income had placed him firmly in the upper echelon of society. Now he worked as a medical technician for barely above minimum wage, living paycheck to paycheck, buying Maya's clothes from discount stores because every dollar mattered. The irony that Cassandra was lecturing about contributing to society while he had literally saved lives for a living was not lost on him. A memory flashed through Cole's mind with painful clarity. Standing in his old office at Boston General, the afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as he looked at Isabella's cancer diagnosis for the first time. The words on the pathology report had blurred together as the reality sank in. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, aggressive, limited treatment options. He remembered the weight of the decision that followed, choosing between the demanding schedule of a cardiac surgeon and being present for his wife's final months. Most colleagues had thought he was crazy to give up a 7-figure salary, but they hadn't understood that some things mattered more than money. The financial devastation had been swift and complete. Isabella's treatment had drained their savings, their investments, their home equity, everything they had built together over the years. Insurance covered some costs, but left gaping holes that swallowed their future whole. When she died 18 months later, Cole found himself alone with Maya, qualified for a job that required 100-hour weeks, but responsible for a grieving 6-year-old who needed her remaining parent present and available. The choice had been easy, even if the consequences were harsh. Now he worked in the same hospital where he had once been chief of cardiac surgery, but in the basement running diagnostic equipment for a fraction of his former salary. His colleagues from the old days either didn't recognize him or pretended not to see him when their paths crossed in hospital corridors. The white coat that had once carried his name and prestigious title now hung in a closet at home, a reminder of everything he had sacrificed and lost. But watching Maya sleep peacefully in his arms after a good day, seeing her smile when he read bedtime stories, hearing her laugh at silly jokes, those moments reminded him that he had made the right choice. Maya's breathing had settled into a more regular pattern, and Cole felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. His medical training allowed him to monitor her condition with precision that most parents couldn't achieve, recognizing the subtle signs that indicated whether her asthma was improving or worsening. The way her color had returned to normal, the reduced effort in her breathing, the relaxation of the muscles around her neck, all positive indicators that the worst of the episode had passed. He made a mental note to adjust her medication when they got home, a decision based on years of medical knowledge he couldn't afford to act upon professionally anymore. The flight attendant returned with a forced smile and diplomatic language that barely concealed the pressure she was under. "Sir, I hate to ask this, but would it be possible for you and your daughter to move to the very back row? We've had some concerns expressed about the coughing, and it might be more comfortable for everyone involved." Her eyes showed genuine sympathy, but her words were clearly scripted by training that prioritized paying customers over human dignity. "I can help you gather your things and get settled in a quieter area of the cabin." Cole looked down at Maya, who was finally resting peacefully against his chest, then back at the flight attendant. The request was humiliating but not unexpected. He had learned that money talked loudly in every aspect of society, and those without it were expected to accommodate those with it. "She's finally comfortable," he said quietly, his voice carrying no anger despite the situation. "Moving her now might trigger another episode. We'll stay as quiet as possible here." His tone was respectful but firm, the voice of someone who knew exactly what his daughter needed medically, but couldn't afford to explain why. "From business class." Cassandra's voice rose with indignant authority as she summoned the head flight attendant. "Excuse me, but I specifically requested that those disruptive passengers be moved. I'm a Platinum Elite member of this airline, and I expect my concerns to be addressed immediately." Her French manicure tapped impatiently against her champagne glass as she spoke. "I have an important business meeting when we land, and I need to rest during this flight. The constant coughing is simply unacceptable." Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the light as she gestured toward the economy section with obvious disdain. The head flight attendant, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair, approached Cassandra's seat with professional composure. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, and we're doing everything we can to ensure all passengers are comfortable. The gentleman has assured us that his daughter's condition is under control, and moving them now might actually worsen the situation." She spoke with the patience of someone who had dealt with entitled passengers for decades. "Perhaps we could offer you some noise-cancelling headphones, or I could see if there's another seat available in business class that might be further from any potential disturbance." Cassandra's face flushed with the particular shade of red that came from having her authority questioned by service personnel. "I don't want headphones. I want those people moved away from civilized passengers. Surely you have policies about sick children and their impact on other travelers." She leaned forward in her leather seat, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried clearly through the cabin. "Between you and me, people like that shouldn't be flying at all. If they can't afford proper medical care for their child, they certainly can't afford to be on this flight. It's probably charity tickets or government assistance paying for their seats." The businessman from seat 12, A, joined the conversation with his own complaint, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to having his demands met. "I have to say, I'm disappointed in the airline's handling of this situation. When I pay premium prices for business class, I expect a certain caliber of passenger experience." He adjusted his silk tie with practiced precision, his Hermes cufflinks catching the cabin lighting. "Perhaps there should be health screenings before boarding, or at minimum, some consideration for those of us who actually pay full fare for our tickets." Cole heard every word despite the speaker's attempts at discretion, each comment landing like a small wound to his already battered pride. Maya stirred in his arms, and he automatically adjusted his position to ensure her airway remained clear, his medical training overriding everything else despite the humiliation burning in his chest. He had learned to swallow his pride for Maya's sake, to endure the casual cruelty of strangers who judged worth by appearance and bank account balance. But the irony wasn't lost on him that these people were demanding health screenings while he sat among them with more medical knowledge than all of them combined. As the flight attendants continued their delicate negotiations with the business class passengers, Cole found himself remembering another flight from years ago. He had been returning from a medical conference in Chicago, sitting in first class with colleagues, discussing the latest developments in cardiac surgery over premium wine and gourmet meals. They had laughed about the cramped conditions in economy, making jokes about the cattle car sections of the plane. The memory filled him with shame now, realizing how casually cruel they had been, how little thought they had given to the circumstances that placed people in different parts of the cabin. Maya opened her eyes and looked up at her father with the trusting gaze that never failed to strengthen his resolve. "Daddy, are we almost there?" she whispered, her breathing much easier now. "I want to see the new apartment." They were moving to Seattle for a job opportunity that paid slightly better than his current position, a chance to start over in a city where no one knew about his fall from medical prominence. It wasn't much, but it represented hope for a better future, a chance to rebuild their lives away from the constant reminders of everything he had lost. "Just a little while longer, sweetheart," Cole murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "And remember, we're going to have our own little garden where you can help me plant flowers." His voice carried genuine warmth despite their circumstances, the love of a father who had sacrificed everything for his child's well-being. "Maybe we'll even get a small tree where birds can build nests." These simple dreams had replaced his former ambitions of surgical innovations and medical breakthroughs, but they felt more precious now because they were shared with the most important person in his world. The tension in the cabin continued to build as more business-class passengers joined the complaint chorus, their voices creating a symphony of entitlement that grated against Cole's nerves. A woman in pearls and a designer suit loudly proclaimed that she would never fly this airline again if they didn't maintain proper standards. A man with silver hair and expensive cologne suggested that economy passengers should be required to pass health inspections before being allowed near premium cabins. Each comment added another layer to the humiliation, but Cole remained focused on Maya's steady breathing and the knowledge that they would survive this flight just as they had survived everything else. 20 minutes passed in uncomfortable tension, with Cassandra making increasingly dramatic demands and the flight attendants working desperately to appease all parties. Cole noticed several economy passengers glancing their way with sympathetic expressions, but none spoke up against the vocal minority in business class. The social dynamics of the airplane cabin reflected the broader inequalities of society. Those with money wielded their privilege like weapons, while those without it absorbed the blows in silence. Maya had fallen asleep again, her small hand curled against Cole's chest, blissfully unaware of the adult drama swirling around them. The irony of the situation struck Cole with particular force as he watched Cassandra gesture dramatically while discussing her important business meeting. Here was a woman who probably contributed nothing tangible to human welfare, who had likely inherited her wealth or earned it through financial manipulation, lecturing about social contribution while he sat quietly among the people she deemed unworthy. His hands, which had saved hundreds of lives, were now considered somehow inferior to her manicured fingers that had never touched anything more challenging than a computer keyboard or champagne glass. Suddenly, the relative calm of the cabin was shattered by a commotion near the front of business class. An elderly gentleman in an expensive suit had risen from his seat and was clutching his chest, his face pale and contorted with pain. His briefcase tumbled to the floor with a loud crash, spilling papers and electronic devices across the aisle. Other passengers gasped and pulled back as the man staggered, one hand pressed against his heart, while the other reached desperately for something to steady himself against. His breathing became labored and rapid, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool cabin temperature. The flight attendants rushed toward the medical emergency with trained efficiency, but their faces showed the controlled panic of people confronting a situation beyond their expertise. The head flight attendant immediately reached for the intercom system, her voice steady despite the crisis unfolding before her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical emergency on board. If there is a doctor or medical professional among our passengers, please identify yourself immediately and come forward to assist." The announcement echoed through the cabin with urgent authority, cutting through the previous tensions like a knife through silk. Cassandra's face went white as she realized the emergency was happening just rows ahead of her premium seat. Her earlier complaints about sick passengers suddenly seemed trivial in the face of genuine medical crisis. The elderly businessman collapsed fully now, his expensive suit crumpling as he hit the aisle floor with a dull thud. His breathing became shallow and irregular, classic signs of cardiac distress that Cole recognized immediately from his years in emergency medicine. Time was of the essence. Every second of delay could mean the difference between life and death. Cole felt Maya stir in his arms as the commotion woke her from sleep. His entire body tensed as medical instincts warred with his desire to remain invisible, to protect Maya from further humiliation, to avoid revealing the secret he had worked so hard to keep hidden. The businessman's condition was clearly deteriorating. His lips were beginning to show signs of cyanosis, indicating decreased oxygen circulation. Cole's trained eye could see that this was likely a massive myocardial infarction, requiring immediate intervention if there was any hope of survival. "Daddy, what's happening?" Maya whispered, her voice still heavy with sleep, but tinged with worry. "Why is everyone scared?" Her innocent question cut through Cole's internal debate like a scalpel, reminding him of the values he had tried to instill in her despite their difficult circumstances. How could he teach her about helping others, about doing what was right regardless of personal cost, if he sat by while someone died because he was afraid of social embarrassment? The man needed help, and Cole possessed the skills to provide it. The flight attendants were clearly overwhelmed, their basic first aid training insufficient for the cardiac emergency unfolding before them. They called again over the intercom, their voices becoming more urgent as precious seconds ticked away. "Please, if there is any medical professional on board, we need your assistance immediately. This is a life-threatening emergency." The businessman's breathing became even more labored, his skin taking on the grayish pallor that Cole knew indicated critical cardiovascular distress. Cassandra, who had been so vocal about maintaining standards and proper behavior, now sat frozen in her leather seat, her champagne glass forgotten as she stared at the medical crisis with obvious terror. Her earlier confidence and authority had evaporated in the face of real emergency, revealing the shallow foundation of her superiority complex. The other business-class passengers pressed themselves against their seats, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity of death, but equally unwilling to take action beyond calling for someone else to handle the situation. Cole looked down at Maya one more time, seeing his own moral compass reflected in her trusting eyes. "Baby, Daddy needs to help that man who's sick," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that would change everything. "Sometimes we have to do the right thing, even when it's scary or difficult." He gently transferred her to the empty middle seat, ensuring she was secure and comfortable. "I need you to stay right here and be brave for Daddy, okay?" Maya nodded solemnly, her young face showing understanding beyond her years. "Help him, Daddy," she whispered, "like you helped me when I couldn't breathe." Her simple words carried profound weight, reminding Cole that heroism wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about acting when action was needed, regardless of personal consequences. With that final encouragement from the most important person in his world, Cole Harrison rose from his economy seat and began walking toward the front of the plane. The transformation was immediate and striking. Gone was the defeated posture of a man worn down by circumstances and humiliation. In its place emerged the confident bearing of someone who had spent years making life-and-death decisions under pressure. Cole's shoulders straightened, his pace became purposeful, and his voice carried the authority of medical expertise as he announced, "I'm a doctor. Let me through." The worn clothing and patched jeans couldn't hide the sudden emergence of professional competence that radiated from his very presence. Passengers who had been staring at the medical emergency with helpless fascination now turned to watch Cole's approach with growing amazement. This was the same man they had ignored or pitied moments before, the struggling father in discount clothes who had absorbed their casual cruelty without response. Now he moved with the fluid confidence of someone accustomed to handling medical crises, his hands already positioning themselves to assess the patient's condition before he even reached the business class section. Cassandra's mouth fell open in shock as Cole brushed past her seat without acknowledgement, his entire focus centered on the dying man ahead. The irresponsible father she had been mocking was now moving with purpose and authority that made her earlier complaints seem not just petty, but actively harmful. She watched in stunned silence as Cole dropped to his knees beside the businessman, his hands immediately finding pulse points and his trained eye assessing respiratory distress with practiced efficiency. "Sir, can you hear me?" Cole's voice carried the calm authority of someone who had handled hundreds of similar emergencies. His fingers found the carotid pulse, while his other hand checked for breathing obstruction, movements so smooth and practiced they seemed choreographed. "I'm Dr. Harrison. I'm here to help you." The businessman's eyes flickered with recognition and desperate hope as Cole began his assessment, professional competence replacing the chaos that had gripped the cabin moments before. The flight attendants stepped back to give Cole room to work, their relief evident as someone with actual medical expertise took control of the situation. "What do you need from us, Doctor?" the head flight attendant asked, her earlier diplomatic language replaced by genuine respect and urgency. Cole's transformation from dismissed passenger to commanding medical professional was complete, his expertise undeniable as he began the process of trying to save a life at 35,000 feet. Cole's hands moved with surgical precision as he loosened the businessman's tie and collar, ensuring unrestricted airflow while checking for signs of cardiac arrest. "I need the medical kit immediately," he commanded without looking up, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to leading medical teams. "And prepare the automated external defibrillator if you have one on board." His training kicked in completely now, years of emergency medicine experience guiding his actions as he worked to stabilize the patient's condition. The elderly businessman's face had taken on the grayish pallor that Cole knew indicated severe cardiovascular distress. His pulse was weak and irregular, classic signs of myocardial infarction that required immediate intervention. Cole positioned his hands for chest compressions, his medical knowledge allowing him to calculate the precise pressure and rhythm needed to maintain blood circulation to vital organs. "Sir, I need you to stay with me," he said firmly, beginning CPR with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed the procedure countless times. "Clear the area, please," Cole instructed the gathering crowd of passengers, his voice remaining calm despite the life-or-death urgency of the situation. "I need space to work and access to the medical equipment." The business-class passengers who had been so vocal about maintaining their privilege now scrambled to accommodate the emergency, their earlier complaints forgotten in the face of genuine medical crisis. Cole's quiet authority commanded instant respect, his expertise undeniable as he worked to save the stranger's life. The businessman's breathing became more labored, and Cole immediately recognized the signs of pulmonary edema associated with heart failure. He adjusted his patient's position to improve lung function while maintaining chest compressions, his movements fluid and confident despite the cramped aircraft conditions. Years of working in hospital emergency rooms had prepared him for challenging environments, but performing cardiac resuscitation in an airplane aisle presented unique obstacles that required creative adaptation of standard medical procedures. Maya watched from her economy seat as her father commanded the attention and respect of every person on the plane. The same passengers who had dismissed them as unworthy now hung on Cole's every word, desperately hoping his medical expertise could save the dying man. Her young mind couldn't fully grasp the irony of the situation, but she felt proud seeing her daddy help someone who needed his special skills, just as he had always helped her when her breathing became difficult. The flight attendant returned with the plane's medical kit, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the case for Cole's inspection. Inside were basic emergency supplies, oxygen masks, bandages, medications for common in-flight medical issues, but nothing approaching the sophisticated equipment Cole was accustomed to using in hospital settings. He would have to improvise, using his knowledge and experience to compensate for the limitations of aircraft emergency medicine. "Is there anyone with nursing experience on board?" Cole called out, while continuing chest compressions, his voice carrying throughout the cabin. "I could use assistance with monitoring and medication administration." His request was met with silence from the business class section, but a woman from economy raised her hand tentatively. "I'm a retired ICU nurse," she called forward, already moving toward the front of the plane with the same sense of professional duty that had motivated Cole to action. The retired nurse introduced herself as Patricia and immediately fell into the rhythm of medical teamwork that both she and Cole remembered from their hospital days. She assisted with vital sign monitoring, while Cole continued his assessment and treatment of the cardiac emergency. Their professional collaboration created an island of medical competence in the midst of passenger panic. Two healthcare workers doing what they had been trained to do regardless of their current circumstances or social status. Cole administered nitroglycerin from the medical kit, hoping to improve blood flow to the patient's heart muscle while maintaining chest compressions. The businessman's color began to improve slightly, indicating that the emergency interventions were having some positive effect. "Good," Cole murmured, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who lived for these moments when medical knowledge could make the difference between life and death. "Keep fighting, sir. We're not giving up on you." Cassandra sat frozen in her seat, watching the drama unfold with growing horror at her own behavior. The man she had dismissed as an irresponsible father was now literally holding someone's life in his hands, demonstrating expertise and dedication that made her earlier complaints seem not just petty, but actively evil. She realized with sickening clarity that she had spent the flight attacking someone who possessed more genuine value and social contribution than anyone else in business class, including herself. The patient's pulse strengthened under Cole's expert care, and his breathing became more regular as the medical intervention took effect. Cole continued monitoring vital signs while preparing for the possibility that more aggressive treatment might be needed if the man's condition deteriorated again. His calm competence had transformed the chaotic emergency into a controlled medical situation, demonstrating the years of training and experience that his current circumstances had hidden from view. 20 minutes into the medical emergency, the patient's condition had stabilized enough for Cole to feel cautiously optimistic about the outcome. The businessman was conscious and responsive, his color much improved from the grayish pallor that had indicated imminent cardiac arrest. Cole continued monitoring while explaining to the patient what had happened and what treatment had been provided, his bedside manner reflecting the compassion that had originally drawn him to medicine. "Captain," the head flight attendant spoke into her communication device, "our medical emergency has been stabilized by a passenger who identified himself as a doctor. The patient appears to be out of immediate danger, but we should consider priority landing if possible." Cole nodded his agreement with the assessment, knowing that while he had managed the acute crisis, the patient would need comprehensive cardiac evaluation and treatment that could only be provided in a hospital setting. The captain's voice came over the intercom moments later, addressing the entire cabin with news of the medical situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to personally thank Dr. Cole Harrison for his expert medical intervention during our emergency. Thanks to his quick action and professional expertise, our passenger is now stable and receiving continued care." The announcement carried throughout the plane, reaching every passenger who had witnessed the dramatic transformation from dismissed economy passenger to life-saving medical hero. Patricia, the retired nurse, looked at Cole with professional recognition and respect. "That was textbook cardiac emergency management," she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed countless medical crises. "You saved his life, doctor. That man wouldn't have survived without immediate professional intervention." Her words carried special weight because they came from another medical professional who understood exactly what Cole had accomplished under difficult circumstances. The businessman, now stable but still requiring monitoring, reached up with a trembling hand to touch Cole's arm. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse but filled with genuine gratitude. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Cole smiled reassuringly, his response reflecting the humility that had always characterized his approach to medicine. "I'm just glad I could help, sir. That's what we're supposed to do for each other." As Cole prepared to return to his seat and check on Maya, the captain made another announcement that would cement the transformation of everyone's perception. "I've just reviewed our passenger manifest, and I want to give proper recognition to Dr. Cole Harrison, former chief of cardiac surgery at Boston General Hospital, who saved a life today through his exceptional medical expertise and quick thinking." The words echoed through the cabin like thunder, creating absolute silence as every passenger absorbed the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Cassandra felt her world shift on its axis as the captain's words sank in. The man she had spent the flight attacking and humiliating was not just a doctor, but had been the chief of cardiac surgery at one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country. Her chest tightened with shame as she realized the depth of her misjudgment, the cruelty of her assumptions, and the profound injustice of her behavior toward someone who had dedicated his life to saving others. The business-class passengers who had joined her chorus of complaints now sat in stunned silence, their earlier sense of superiority crumbling as they confronted the reality of their own prejudice and ignorance. The man they had dismissed as unworthy had just demonstrated more genuine worth and social value than all of them combined. Their expensive clothes and premium seats suddenly seemed trivial compared to the life-saving expertise they had tried to banish from their presence. Cole walked slowly back through the cabin toward his economy seat, every passenger's eyes following his movement with newfound respect and amazement. The same people who had earlier avoided eye contact or looked at him with pity now watched with something approaching awe. His worn clothing and patched jeans remained unchanged, but everything else about how he was perceived had been transformed by the revelation of his true identity and capabilities. Maya's face lit up with pride as her father approached their seats, her young heart swelling with love and admiration for the man who had just saved someone's life. "Daddy, you helped him!" she exclaimed with the pure joy of a child witnessing her parents' heroism. "Everyone is looking at you like you're important." Cole gathered her into his arms, his heart full of gratitude that she had witnessed him doing something positive and meaningful rather than simply enduring humiliation. "We all have something important to offer the world, sweetheart," Cole murmured into Maya's hair, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned profound lessons about human worth and dignity. "Sometimes people can't see it right away, but that doesn't make it less real or valuable." His words carried multiple layers of meaning, a lesson for his daughter, a reflection on their recent experience, and a reminder that true worth had nothing to do with external circumstances. The flight attendant approached their seats with an expression of deep respect and gratitude, her earlier diplomatic language replaced by genuine warmth and appreciation. "Dr. Harrison, I cannot thank you enough for what you did today. You saved that man's life, and you did it with such grace and professionalism despite—" She paused, clearly struggling with how to acknowledge the earlier mistreatment Cole had endured. "Despite the difficult circumstances you faced earlier in the flight." Cole's response demonstrated the character that had driven him to sacrifice his lucrative career for his family's well-being. "I'm just glad I could help," he said simply, his voice free of bitterness or resentment, despite the humiliation he had endured. "That's what we're supposed to do for each other when someone needs help." His gracious response only increased the respect of everyone who heard it, demonstrating a level of maturity and forgiveness that elevated him even further in their estimation. The remainder of the flight passed in contemplative silence as passengers processed what they had witnessed. The dramatic reversal of fortune, the revelation of hidden worth, and the profound lesson about judging others had created a subdued atmosphere of reflection and shame among those who had participated in Cole's earlier humiliation. Maya fell asleep against her father's chest, peaceful and proud, while Cole gazed out the small economy window at the clouds below. Cassandra spent the remaining flight time wrestling with the magnitude of her misjudgment and the cruelty of her behavior. She had built her entire sense of superiority on wealth and social status, dismissing those she deemed beneath her without consideration for their actual worth or circumstances. The revelation that Cole had been a prominent surgeon who had sacrificed everything for his family's well-being created a level of shame she had never experienced before. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, passengers started gathering their belongings and preparing for landing. The usual rush and impatience of air travel was muted by the weight of the day's events, the medical emergency and subsequent revelation having created a shared experience that transcended the usual social barriers of airplane seating arrangements. Cole remained in his economy seat, holding Maya and watching the city appear below them through the small window. The businessman Cole had saved was wheeled off the plane first by waiting paramedics, but not before pressing a business card into Cole's hand with trembling fingers. "Please," he whispered urgently, "let me do something to thank you properly. You gave me my life back today." Cole accepted the card graciously but non-committally, his focus remaining on Maya and their new beginning in Seattle rather than on potential rewards for doing what he considered his basic human duty. As passengers began deplaning, Cassandra found herself struggling with how to approach Cole and Maya. Her earlier confidence and authority had completely evaporated replaced by crushing shame and a desperate need to somehow apologize for her inexcusable behavior. She waited near the business class exit, her designer luggage seeming suddenly ostentatious and embarrassing as she watched Cole gather his few possessions and prepare to leave the plane with quiet dignity. "Dr. Harrison," Cassandra's voice cracked as she finally found the courage to speak, her usual commanding tone replaced by genuine humility. "I owe you an apology that I don't even know how to begin making. My behavior today was inexcusable, and I'm ashamed of every word I said." Her manicured hands shook as she spoke, the weight of her misjudgment creating a level of emotional distress she had never experienced before. Cole paused in the aisle, Maya's hand secure in his own, and looked at Cassandra with eyes that held no anger or resentment. "We all make mistakes in how we see each other," he said quietly, his voice carrying the same compassion he had shown to his patient during the medical emergency. "What matters is what we learn from those mistakes and how we treat people going forward." His gracious response demonstrated the depth of character that had originally drawn him to medicine and motivated his life of service to others. "How can you be so kind after the way I treated you?" Cassandra asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes as she confronted the magnitude of Cole's character compared to her own behavior. "I judged you based on your clothes and your seat, without knowing anything about who you really are or what you've been through." Her voice carried genuine anguish as she realized how close she had come to preventing Cole from helping the dying passenger through her efforts to have him removed from the cabin. Cole shifted Maya to his other arm and looked directly at Cassandra with the patient expression of someone who had learned profound lessons about human nature through personal suffering. "Because holding anger hurts Maya more than it hurts anyone else," he explained gently. "I want her to learn that we respond to cruelty with kindness, to ignorance with understanding, and to judgment with forgiveness." His words carried the wisdom of someone who had been forced to rebuild his entire understanding of what truly mattered in life. Maya looked up at the crying lady in the expensive clothes and spoke with the clear honesty that only children possess. "My daddy is the best daddy in the world," she said simply. "He takes care of sick people because that's what good people do." Her innocent words hit Cassandra like a physical blow, emphasizing the purity of Cole's motivation and the depth of her own moral failure in attacking such a person. The airport terminal bustled with typical travel chaos as Cole and Maya made their way toward baggage claim, their few possessions marking them as different from the business travelers with expensive luggage and urgent phone calls. But now Cole carried himself with quiet confidence, no longer trying to hide or minimize his presence. The events on the plane had reminded him that his worth wasn't determined by his current circumstances, but by his character and capabilities. Cassandra watched them walk away, a father and daughter facing an uncertain future with dignity and love that her wealth could never purchase. She realized with sickening clarity that in all her business success and financial accumulation, she had never contributed anything as meaningful as Cole did simply by being a good father and using his medical skills to help others. The revelation forced her to confront fundamental questions about how she had chosen to live her life and measure her worth. As Cole and Maya waited for their single battered suitcase at baggage claim, they were approached by several passengers from the flight who wanted to express their gratitude and respect. The retired nurse Patricia handed Cole her business card, offering to provide references for any job applications he might submit in Seattle. "Any hospital would be lucky to have you," she said warmly. "Your expertise saved a life today, and your character inspired everyone who witnessed it." The businessman Cole had saved appeared in a wheelchair, accompanied by his family who had rushed to the airport upon hearing about the medical emergency. "Dr. Harrison," he called out weakly but urgently, "please don't leave without letting me properly thank you. You gave me the chance to see my grandchildren grow up." His wife and adult children gathered around Cole with tears in their eyes, expressing gratitude that went far beyond words for the gift of additional time with their loved one. Cole accepted their thanks graciously, while explaining that he had simply done what any doctor would do in the same situation. His humility in the face of their overwhelming gratitude demonstrated the character that had driven all his life decisions, from his dedication to medicine to his sacrifice for Maya's well-being. "I'm just glad I was there when you needed help," he said simply, his arm around Maya as she watched the emotional scene with wide eyes. As they finally retrieved their luggage and prepared to leave the airport, Maya looked up at her father with the wisdom that comes from watching adults behave both badly and beautifully. "Daddy, why did that lady say mean things about us when she didn't know we were good people?" she asked, her innocent question cutting to the heart of human prejudice and assumption. "And why did everyone change when they found out you're a doctor?" Cole knelt down to Maya's eye level in the middle of the busy terminal, other travelers flowing around them as he prepared to deliver one of life's most important lessons. "Sometimes people think that having money or fancy things makes them better than other people," he explained gently. "But what really makes someone valuable is how they treat others, especially people who need help or kindness." His words carried the weight of recent experience and hard-won wisdom about human nature and social hierarchy. "You mean like how you helped the sick man, even though the lady was being mean to us?" Maya asked, her young mind processing the complex moral dynamics she had witnessed. "Because helping people is more important than what they think about us." Cole smiled at his daughter's understanding, proud that she was learning the values that had guided his own difficult decisions over the past few years. "Exactly right, sweetheart," Cole confirmed, gathering Maya into his arms as they prepared to begin their new life in Seattle. "We measure ourselves by how we treat others, not by how much money we have or what other people think about us." As they walked toward the exit doors, sunlight streaming through the terminal windows illuminated their path forward, a family bound together by love and guided by principles that transcended material circumstances. Behind them, Cassandra Blake sat alone in an expensive airport restaurant, staring at her reflection in the window while contemplating the profound lesson she had learned about worth, dignity, and the danger of judging others by superficial appearances. The champagne she ordered tasted bitter as she realized that despite all her wealth and status, she had never contributed anything as meaningful as the quiet man in patched jeans who had saved a life while absorbing her cruel judgment with grace and dignity. The story of Dr. Cole Harrison and his daughter Maya would become legend among the airline crew and passengers who witnessed it, a reminder that heroism often wears ordinary clothes and that the people we dismiss might possess extraordinary worth. Their journey to Seattle represented more than a change of location. It symbolized the possibility of redemption, the power of character over circumstance, and the enduring truth that a person's value lies not in their bank account, but in their willingness to help others when help is needed most.